Welcome to Quilting on the Side, the podcast where we uncover the secrets to turning your passion for quilting into a profitable side hustle.
I'm Tori from the Quilt Patch by Tori.
And I'm Andi from True Blue Quilts. And together, we're your co-hosts on this exciting journey of creativity, entrepreneurship, and all things quilting.
We're here to help you navigate the world of quilt pattern design, course creation, digital marketing, and running an online quilt business. We've been through the ups and downs ourselves, so we know what it takes to make money from your favorite hobby.
That's right, Tori. We're going to share our experiences on how we've grown our businesses while balancing family with other paying work responsibilities. It's not always easy, but it's definitely possible. Welcome to another episode of Quilting on the Side. Grab a refreshing beverage, your pen and paper, get ready to take some notes because Tori and I are going to dive into all things e-commerce tonight. And I know that's why a lot of you are here. Well, could be tonight, morning, afternoon, whenever you're listening to us. We're just glad you're here. How are you doing, Tori?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Andi?
I'm great. For those that may be a little bit confused about terminology, e-commerce, we're just talking about online sales, folks, nothing mysterious. And there are several different levels or platforms that people encounter when they get ready to sell online. Where did you start with your quilts and patterns, Tori?
So way back when I started actually with Facebook, I had made a group and I put up an album with the quilts that I had for sale, and then I would have them PayPal me when they wanted to pay for something. But when I realized that I could reach a wider audience on a different platform, I started where I think many of us probably have started or thought about starting, which was Etsy. So I put a lot of my handmade quilts on Etsy along with like baby blankets and those little, what do you call them, the crinkly toys? We put plastic ribbons around the edge.
Yeah, the fidget cloth things.
Yeah, the little baby toys. Yeah, I put those on there. And bookmarks, I think was the other thing I put on there. And then, yeah, that's where I started. I started with Etsy. And I know that a lot of people start with Etsy. But where did you start, Andi?
I am trying to remember. I was not quite as clever back in those days of utilizing Facebook. I think I did. It probably started on Etsy as well. I'm trying to think. I dabbled in eBay. I mean, that's how old I am. Is
My husband still lists stuff on eBay.
Yeah. It never was a money maker for me, but I've never had that great of success with in-person garage sales in my own neighborhood. So I don't have that kind of mentality, I guess, the marketplace of everything, and you just kind of hawk your wares and so what attracted you to Etsy, and what do you think is the big draw for most people starting out?
Yeah, I think it's the audience, because they do have an audience. Their audience trusts Etsy to make sure they're connecting with real makers, that we're real people. Sometimes they don't always keep that in mind, that we are real people on the other side of Etsy. But I think that there's a trust built up there. So they have and they have a reputation of supporting creatives and crafters, makers, anyone who does custom work. So it was an easy way for me to get introduced to the e-commerce side and really understanding how to upload what information people are looking for when they're looking at a quilt, or and then later a quilt pattern. It really got me in the door when it came to what information needs to be out there. How do I list something? And how do I get traffic to one place? And, what is traffic? So that was my introduction, and like really trying to understand how this all works. And, I mean, there are all kinds of ways you can do that, but I'd like to shoot the question back at you, but I can't remember how you said it. What attracted you to Etsy? That's what it was. What attracted you to Etsy?
A lot of those same things, kind of the ease of use. It's a very much a click through very easy. If you can post on Facebook, pretty much you can set up an Etsy shop. There may be a few more details there, but it's very low cost initially to put a post up there. It's penny. I say pennies. It's like once you have your shop set up, it may be like 20 to 25 cents, and these are US figures, of course, to have a product there, which in the grand scheme of things, you're not paying much more for any add-ons on the Etsy platform. And we'll get into a little bit later some other places that you're going to incur more costs. And I agree, they have a great audience that is surfing around, but that leads to some of the drawbacks to Etsy. And once you get in there and play the game a little bit, what have you found as a turnoff?
I was really disappointed in like the fees. Like you said, it's a low barrier of entry to get started. I think they're going to start charging like a setup fee, but still even that is only about $15. So it's not too bad. And then every time you list something, it's like 20, 25 cents, like you said. But once I listed it, I got those initial charges and I'm like, okay, this isn't much. This is great to start setting up. Now I understand what information needs to be out there, which to me, learning something with the cost always helps. But then I was kind of relying on Etsy traffic, like getting people to my listing. So I really kind of dived into like the not leaderboards, but there's a like a social platform behind Etsy when you're a seller where you can go and look at questions or ask questions. I never asked. I'm never a question asker. I'm usually one that just looks at everybody else's answers. So I was in there trying to figure out how to make,
I think you're thinking of the forums.
Yes, the forums. So I was looking at everybody's questions and answers, trying to figure out how to make my listings better so that Etsy would push them up without paying for an ad for Etsy. And so that's kind of where I started pushing that not boundary, but like trying to figure Etsy out and how to make it work for me. And of course I started with quilts. So it's a higher priced item. And I thought lowering the price might bring people in. So I tried that. I tried all these different ways to try to get people in the door to buy my quilts. And I sold maybe 3 on there over about 2 years. And the fees that they took off, it was disheartening. Like it was just like, how can I make this a business when I'm paying so much for fabric and materials and Etsy and it put up there, and it's cheap to put up there, but when Etsy takes their fees, it takes so much off the top that I hardly get anything back. Like I can't make a business that way. There is a way you can make that a business. You do have to find your audience and build that up. But at the time, that was not something I knew how to do. I was ready to put in I wasn't ready to put in the time. I had a really short time limit to make this business work, or I had to go, get a full-time job, which I do now. But yeah, that was the biggest drawback I saw is when I sold this big item for, I think the most expensive thing I sold on there was probably $250 for a like throw size quilt. And they took off so much of it that it wasn't even worth putting it up there and then shipping it out and doing all that. On a lower priced thing though, when I switched to pattern design, that's when the fee wasn't so high, of course, because it's percentage, and they took care of like the taxes, they took care of the shipping stuff. All I really had to do was put it in a box or in an envelope and send it off. So that was kind of good, but still they're taking enough off the top to where it doesn't feel good to me to sell on Etsy. And I have to say that with a caveat, because I also now have my own website. So seeing the differences there, it was still pretty disheartening every time a sale comes through on Etsy, because I still have a few patterns on Etsy. It's just like, oh, cool. And then move on, which is when a sale comes through on my website, I'm like, I sold a pattern. Like I get so excited. But let's go ahead and have you answer that as well. What was some of your biggest like drawbacks from Etsy?
Yeah, they're pretty universal, I think, once you have that experience, because they do. If you are trying to build in the cost, the true cost of the item, you have to add on shipping, quilts are going to be bulky and heavy, so shipping's going to be more expensive. And if you try to build that into your price, then you've kind of put yourself out of the market of somebody coming to look for a deal. We know that, yes, you can build up that high-end clientele that's willing to pay $300 and $400 for a quilt. But again, Etsy's going to take, $50, $75 off the top by the time they figure everything out. And then, you have to make sure that you've got all your settings correct so that you're not running. It's like they automatically put you into the pool for their offsite ads. And then if their tracker can connect you to their offsite ad, then they take a huge percentage again, because they have to cover their advertising. And we all saw that great ad at the Super Bowl of the gift for France that they found on Etsy. Yeah. So yeah. And sometimes you can feel like, even though there are a lot of shoppers on Etsy, the work that you have to put in to be found, you have to learn all about Etsy SEO. And we know that SEO is important on our blogs and other social platforms, but and constantly keeping up with all the changes that Etsy makes. Last year or a couple of years ago, they introduced the star seller program. And so now you have to respond to all your comments quickly, or you don't get that star badge. And, so if your listing is next to someone else and they have a super seller star, then of course that's just human nature to go to what is perceived as the better shops. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through, I think, that kind of tip the scale if you were initially attracted to that low startup cost, that eventually you see that, okay, maybe I have to work a little bit harder, and there may be an easier route.
Like, it feels a lot like it's got an algorithm like Etsy does. So it works. It reminds me of Pinterest, the way, like, I don't know the ins and outs of this algorithm just on this side of it. And as a buyer, because I've also gone on there and bought stuff from Etsy, it feels a lot like Pinterest. You're on there to buy, which is a great advantage for being on Etsy, is that people who are on there are looking to buy. They're not just looking for inspiration like they would be on Pinterest. They are looking to buy. And if you can get the sales in, if you can get the SEO down, if you can get the reviews in, if you can do all those things and push your own traffic in, then you can really do really well on Etsy. But it does take a lot of work. It feels a lot like the social media app where, as you said, they change things around. And it's just really trying to keep up when you still have to do that with your own website. However, you're also getting more back in time and money with your own website. So just having that experience now, I see the difference, and I see where I would prefer to spend my time versus where I was spending my time when I was on a hosting platform like Etsy. And that's something to weigh for where you are currently in your business. Are you someone who really does want to utilize Etsy and their audience and see how that works for you? If you can make it work, then that's a great way to start, especially to start, because it is a low cost of entry versus paying. And I know my website is just under $400, and I can do everything I need. I can host classes. I can host e-commerce. I can do all this other stuff. So it's just kind of a trade-off in time, money, resources, and like generating traffic. Like, which one are you going to trade for now? And then maybe you can change your mind later. Sorry, I'm like already skipping into the website, because I'm like, there are good things about Etsy, but they're just compared to a website, it could be better. So something to take into account.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. We can certainly transition, because the counterpoint, and even a lot of Etsy gurus, the people online that are offering courses to master Etsy and set up your shop and everything, they themselves will say the best thing to do is to move to your website. And the biggest advantage there is because you own your website. You don't have to play anybody else's game. You can set it up exactly the way you want. You, as you said, you've got, yes, you have the overhead of maintaining the website, and we've talked about that in another episode that we'll link in the show notes, but you own it. So, build your own corner of the internet and spend all that effort driving to your own website. But what we mentioned, one of the big attractions of a platform like Etsy is the traffic. So does that become a con on your own website?
I don't know, because like I mentioned, I still have patterns on Etsy, and right before we recorded, me and Adi were kind of looking at our back end numbers, and my numbers, and they'll show you on your back end, 10% is coming from Etsy ads and their marketing, which I know that all of my patterns are only getting views. I shouldn't say only, but I know they're coming from Pinterest, because I've done image searches on them, and I see the Etsy my same pictures are put on Etsy's website or on Pinterest, and I did not put them there. And it says Etsy on it. So I know that's how they're getting traffic to Etsy, is just putting it on Pinterest. So why wouldn't I take them off Etsy, put my own effort into Pinterest to generate more sales, more interest, put up there what I want them to see and the advantages that I think that would really appeal to a quilter, and get that traffic to my website where I can capture their email and interact with them. I can offer an upsell, which you can kind of do on Etsy, but I can. And that's one, I think another major advantage of a website is that you get to interact with your customers. You can actually have their email. And I know there's a few plugins with Etsy now where you can actually get an email from a customer, but still they are loyal more to Etsy than they are to the brand or the owner. Whereas if they come to your website, if they're looking at your other patterns, if they're finding inspiration, and you are capturing their email, sending them your core content, your newsletter, other stuff you're doing, they're going to be much more likely to buy again, because they're getting to know you and your brand and what you stand for, rather than just jumping on Etsy and buying a pretty pattern.
And one of the other kind of things along with that, I mean, yes, it does take a while to build up the loyal audience and the traffic numbers to your website, but if you're spending that effort to get found on Etsy, just like you said, you can get a much better return for that same amount of effort if you devote it to your own website. And then kind of a related issue that comes up a lot, especially in the kind of owner groups and seller groups, is this whole issue of customer service. So do you have any fun stories related to customer service or beware instances?
I don't. So I've been selling patterns on my own website for 3 years, and I have never had a problem. I mean, the only problem I can recall off the top of my head is someone didn't get the link before it expired. So didn't download the pattern before it expired. And I was like, oh, no problem. I'll send you the link. That was it. And I know there are some crazy stories from other pattern designers. We are in that pattern design group on Facebook, and you get some stories in there where, like, how would you respond to this customer? How can I help this person? And I've never had any issues with either Etsy or my website. So I'm not going to say my patterns are amazing. I'm just saying they've never reached out to me and had a big enough complaint or anything on the process to actually reach out. Yeah.
Right. It's one of the crazy things that I think is more likely to happen on something, a marketplace like Etsy, is that people get confused about where they purchased. And they think that, well, I got this on Etsy. They don't think of you as an individual shop. Like Andy's Etsy shop is different than Tori's Etsy shop. The customer thinks it's all Etsy, so it should all just be customer service. So from the seller standpoint, the humorous thing is if somebody comes to me and they've actually purchased your pattern, Tori, and they're trying to get help from me, and I have no clue because it's not my pattern. But they get confused there. So those are pretty easy to deal with. And
that's a great point.
Download issues, again, I haven't had a lot of any of the really difficult situations that the horror stories that are floating out there. But
there's
yeah,
less
you
and less.
occasionally,
I think quilters are catching on to the technology of the PDFs and stuff. So I think there's less and less,
yeah,
which is good.
right. And it helps to, while we're kind of on this sidetrack of customer service, it always helps me to have what is called a swipe file, so that I have canned responses for certain things, because I sell specific patterns that need specific tools, and I don't, some of them are bundled, but some of them are standalone patterns that refer to the tool. So it's that someone will email me and say, how do I do this without the tool? And so I want to have a canned response, so I can just go to my swipe file and say, here's the instructions, here's where to get the tool, here's a video. And that way, hopefully I have provided enough support to the customer that they can be successful with my offers. So
And to that point, I've also made an FAQ, a frequently asked question, place on my website, so that if there are questions, especially with my programs, so not necessarily patterns, but my programs have a frequently asked questions section. So I think that helps. So if anybody's listening to this that wants to kind of curb those responses, I think swipe file is an excellent idea, and having frequently asked questions on your website can help. They'll still come straight to you though. So, so it's always good to have, like Andi said, some canned responses, so you're not fumbling for words or instructions at the last second. I think that's a great idea.
Yep. Another kind of funny customer service story, and a warning to other sellers out there, is whether you have a platform like Etsy or whether you have your own website, be mindful of scheduling sales and special promotions when you are traveling, because a lot of people think, oh, this is a great time to have that passive income, have a sale running on my website. I'm not around, it can just run, and that works. But if you have customers emailing you with questions, you need to be, at least checking in a little bit on your vacation or on your traveling. So I have had instances where I had to say, hey, I'm traveling, I'm not at my computer, so I can't get that download, but I will reach out again on, XYZ day when I get home. But yeah, so that's kind of funny to be scrambling on your phone trying to do all this customer service work. So we actually, this is a good time to describe a little bit the website setup that you have, because I know we have different providers, and kind of how did you choose, what were some of the features and things that you looked at when you were choosing an e-commerce structure for your business?
So I was looking at a few different ones. This was a couple years ago. I remember settling on Wix because I liked the way it was very similar to Etsy, and I think they did that on purpose. I think they know their audience. So it was really simple, or not simple, but it was easy for me to translate my my learning that I did on Etsy, learning about what needs to be put on a listing, and move it to Wix, because they have the same, like, you need an image. It uploads very similarly. The way that it's structured on the back end is very similar. You can put whatever you want in the description. The only thing I still have trouble with is their formatting. Like, their formatting doesn't work great. Like, you can't bold stuff or italicize or like make things look really pretty on Wix yet. Like, it doesn't work for me. I don't know why. I need to look into that. When I have some free time. And with Etsy, it's very similar. So, like, it was an easy way to translate over to Wix for me. And then I also wanted to do workshops. So, my main thing was teaching workshops, and I would sell patterns with, like, I was making patterns with my workshop for my workshops. So I was making patterns for my workshops, selling mainly workshops. That's what I really wanted to be doing. And then I released a few, like, standalone patterns. So I just wanted a place to make sure I could list those. Oh, and then I had that book, and I still have it, the What the FPP Is That Vernacular Guide for Quilters. It's a great name, right? FPP, for those that don't know, is foundation paper piecing. So what the FPP. I'm pretty proud of that title. I'm not very clever with my titles for that one. I'm proud of.
That's very
But
good.
so I need a place to list that. So that was my thing. Was I was looking at. I wanted to make sure I had the platform that had a place to do e-commerce, because some of them didn't, and then a place to at the same time host my workshops, host bookings, because I was thinking one-on-one at that time, offering one-on-one private lessons at that time, and then blog. That was the other thing I was looking at. So, and that's why I went with Wix, because I went in, I made a website on Wix before I paid for it, and they were sending me like 50% off coupons. And I'm like, yes, this is the thing I need to do. It's easy for me to use. I like the way it looks. I can move things around really easy. And one thing I realized later on is that it updates the apps for me. So I don't have to worry about updating apps. I don't have to worry about things going out, and they give you like a month's warning if something is going to come out. So like their shipping, they took care of their shipping too, which I didn't know was a feature when I bought it. But when I go in there, all I have to do is like click a few buttons and it makes the shipping stuff for me, and it charges the card that I have on file, and I just print out the slip, put on the box, and send it off. So that was great. And the only real drawback has been figuring out taxes. And mainly I rounded all my numbers. So they're all blanket across the board. And then I just take out a certain percentage for taxes. So when tax time comes around, I just make it real easy to have that money set aside and ready to go. So I didn't go in there and do it for each and every listing. That's how I simplified it. It works for my brain. But you can go in and individualize the taxing if you want to. And I guess that's another advantage that we didn't mention with Etsy, is that they take care of the taxes and international taxes and shipping. So that's a good thing for Etsy, is that international audience. So if you become big in Australia, Etsy might be a great place to send all your Australian customers so that they can get everything, that you have that handled and they get it.
Yeah. Anytime you start shipping out of the United States, it can be a big hassle, because Europe and Australia, all those other countries have different sales tax laws. They charge something called VAT, value added tax. So that can be a bear to navigate. And they also have some other privacy settings. So when you set up your newsletters, GDPR is a big thing to be aware of, and make sure you're following those rules. But you can find YouTube videos that walk you through all those kind of things.
YouTube University.
Yep. And I chose WordPress because I was a blogger before I started selling patterns. So it was kind of a natural upgrade to go from just a blog to then adding the plugin. But I have had to learn a little more on the back end, because WordPress is not a plug and play platform like Wix is. And I have, our podcast website is set up on Wix, so I have the experience now. Thank you, Tori, for your expertise in getting us all set up there. But yeah, so in the future, there's so many options that if I were going to revamp or upgrade or something, I may choose a different problem. But you have a different platform. I'm sure there's different problems that come along with that too.
Oh yeah, it's always going to be a struggle.
Yeah, but I actually had some hand holding, because I was enrolled in a course and we built the e-commerce platform together. So I had step-by-step tutorials on, click this button, choose this. And the more you play with it, the better you get, the more you learn. So I'm very familiar with how to navigate, how to add new products, how to run sales, all those kind of things that go along with e-commerce platforms there. So
Oh, I wanted to share, speaking of now that we're sharing both platforms, I wanted to share a little bit about traffic, because I know that's a big appeal of like a shop like Etsy, or a marketplace like Etsy. And when I actually went through, while we were kind of clicking through our numbers here, and my highest month of traffic on Etsy, this is with both quilts and patterns listed, and me pushing traffic over there from my Facebook group and my Instagram. So I was doing everything. This is when I was doing everything while I was pivoting to pattern design and workshops. So I had everything on there. Was 173 visits. Now I get around at least 200 to up to 500 visits on my website currently. And I'm very niched. I've changed audiences 3 times. So it depends on a sale, depends if I'm doing a challenge, a webinar, something like that. That's the huge difference in traffic there. And the return is way better on a website. And it's just as much effort for me to go in and update my Etsy as it is to go in and create a brand new workshop. Not the recording part, but everything else in Wix. And still, like, it's like night and day. Like if I had known that spending $350 to get my Wix website, which is what it costs the first time I signed up, was about $350 to get all of that and not join Etsy at all, I would have gone on there and I would have put my quilts on my own website and I would have just kept doing what I was doing. But I know not everyone has that option. So if you do need a low cost to enter the marketplace, Etsy can be a great place to start. If you're looking for wholesale, I even looked up the wholesale buyer it's pretty new. We don't know much about it. Andi started the application, but it's a business to business place. It's for wholesalers like quilt shops and distributors. It's called FAIRE, FAIRE. And we've seen a lot of pattern designers sharing about it and really getting some success. So that can be another place to go if you're a pattern designer and looking for wholesale help and distributor help. So that's another place. So if you want to start with Etsy and FAIRE and then work your way up from there and then open your own website, when you've got the learning down, you understand how traffic flows from social media to a website and things like that, then that can be an amazing way to go. So we don't want to completely turn you off from Etsy, right, Andi? But we do want you to know that it is a lot of effort on both ends, with a higher ROI for your own website. Kind of what it boils down to, I think. What do you think, Andi?
Yeah, I would agree. I think you just need to pick and choose, understand that making sales online is work. It's, you can eventually get to that passive income stage where things are, set up. And that's the good thing about the internet right now and a lot of these platforms is you load it once and it's there and people can find it tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, and you aren't doing any more work for that pattern because it's just out there and people can buy it. So that is the attractive part of it. So
you want to share your story about your pattern?
Oh yeah, I have a pattern that was actually part of the first launch collection that I did on my website. Back in 2018, it was called the Starburst Collection. And I have a table runner pattern that I have been getting consistent sales out of the blue. Like I said, this is a pattern from 2018. It is now 2024, and I'm finally getting consistent daily sales of that pattern. And I asked a customer a few weeks ago, and I said, where did you find this pattern? What brought you to my website? Oh, I saw a pin on Pinterest. I don't even know which pin, but luckily I have it directed to my website and not to my Etsy shop because I pay less fees. So yeah, that's been a great success story for one of those, I guess it's cycles, thing. The old is new again.
That thinking of that story, and then I have a blog post that is the most views that any blog post that I have. It's around, I think it's up to 5,000. It's higher than I ever thought possible for my little blog that I had started way back when. It's been I think that one's 3 years old, and it gets traffic from Pinterest. And I'm looking at where the interest is coming from the Etsy shop. It's coming from Pinterest. So what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, this is just coming to mind, like tonight, I think we need to start looking at Pinterest more. at driving sales and maybe put more time into Pinterest than some of these other places that we've been looking at as quilters, as pattern designers, and see what happens when we put more effort into a place like Pinterest, which is one of the higher search engines on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and we can do another follow-up episode on the matching a strategy to a platform and kind of talk about those, because Pinterest is that really good blend of inspiration and sales that, Instagram is trying to get there, but for so long they were just social and just share pretty pictures that it was hard to get sales. Now they've got, you can tag products and that kind of stuff on Instagram. So they're moving in that direction. But yeah, it would be really interesting to compare those social media platforms versus, how we're selling. So to give you a summary, we're not totally against Etsy, but it is a way. There comes a point when you might outgrow it.
Yes.
We definitely encourage everyone to find their own website, and the natural thing that happens when you're trying to sell online is you have to drive traffic, and we have something to help. Tell people about that, Tori.
Oh, we have our quarterly planning session coming. So if you are struggling figuring out how to get your traffic to your next launch, your next offer, your next pattern, your next anything that's coming up in the next couple of months, we have one every quarter. So this one is coming up when this episode airs. It'll be in a few weeks. So it'll be March 29th at 8 p.m. Eastern time.
Just register on the Quilting on the Side website, so www.quiltingontheside.com, and you can find the registration for this free session, where it's kind of a co-working session. We'll jump on, we'll share some ideas, get updates from everyone, and if you have questions, we're free advice.
We're there. Yes, we're there. Both of us are there. You can ask experience, questions, marketing, any ideas, pricing, whatever you have questions on, you can bring to the quarterly planning session, and we plan our year and we socialize and we have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I find a lot of inspiration and value, and it feels really good to get some plans on paper ahead of time, because you just make a plan, work the plan, and then evaluate and tweak it for the next time. So that will be a lot of fun. So thank you to our audience. We want to encourage you to please share this episode if you found value, if you know people that are starting an online business. Hopefully we can give you some good insight.
And you can check out our e-commerce on our Wix website at quiltingontheside.com. We have t-shirts, we have notebooks, we have Post-its, so you can see what it looks like when we list objects. I was going to say objects, but merchandise there. And maybe grab yourself a little Quilting on the Side inspired merch while you're there.
Wonderful. Okay, everyone. We hope you have a lot of success in your e-commerce efforts and find time to do a little quilting on the side. What a great discussion. If you enjoyed this episode of Quilting on the Side, please leave us a review on whichever platform you're listening. It can be iTunes, Spotify, or even our YouTube channel.
And hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next chat. Until then, remember to have fun in your business and do a little quilting on the side.